It's time for a little bit of history. This bit should take 3, 4, 5 minutes, so if you want to go grab something to drink because you don't care about my very interesting tangents, now's a good time. So, way back when games were first becoming more and more and more mainstream, right? There was the era where there were the arcades, where that's where you would leave your house to go to a location where there was a game. But suddenly you started to have the emergence of more easily accessible home computers, floppy disks, CD-ROM drives were getting invented, and there was this huge explosion of sudden consumer interest in owning more software for leisure purposes. Because previously, computers were built and were thought of as a business technology. We're going to do intense, massive computations, do huge database stuff. Why would I ever want to do that sort of massive computation stuff at home? Games, lo and behold, software, and this sort of thing. So many of the early games that were produced were in a genre called the graphic adventure game genre. If you have never heard of these, like maybe if you're 25 and younger, this would actually really not surprise me. They were a kind of game that was built around puzzles, but not of the Sudoku type. There's sometimes games like a BioShock where you'll be playing it and then it will stop and there's a little puzzle that you solve and then you get back to the first-person shooter action. But in these old graphic adventure games, you would collect an inventory of random items, like a fishhook, a blue hat, a marble. You just have a bunch of stuff on you, and then there'd be a bunch of people or doors that you couldn't get past. And you had to figure out how to use the right items in your inventory on the right person to cause something to happen. So a very simple example might be that there's a locked door. And the way to... And you look in there and it says, well, I can see a key in there. And the answer to the puzzle is you have to get a piece of paper, slide it under the door, and then you push from the inside with the fish hook. The key lands on the piece of paper and you can pull it through and unlock it from the other side. Like something like this. So these games had a lot of problems to them. Notably something called moon logic, where what I just described was the idea of something that seems kind of intuitive, right? Like pushing to get the key. Oh, and of course, if you tried to push through, your character would go, well, I don't want to knock the key out. It'll just tumble on the floor and I won't be able to get it then. So that's what's supposed to guide you to, I need to slip a piece of paper or something under there to knock it down. But sometimes you would have to do things that were so bizarre. You'd have like a blue hat, and you'd have to use the blue hat on the fountain, because if you did that, a bird would come down, try to collect the blue hat, get tired, lie down to sleep on the blue hat, and lay an egg, and that's how you got an egg for a character that was saying, if only I had an egg to eat. I mean, stuff where you're like, how the hell am I supposed to intuit that a bird would come to a blue hat and I put it on the fountain for that? What? So there was this substantial drop-off in the purchasing of these kinds of games. And if you look at the game industry right now, in the past few years, when Fortnite came out, everyone was trying to make a battle royale game. When auto chess was getting popular, tons of companies rushed to get their own auto battler onto the market. Back then, it was the same thing. Tons of companies were trying to churn out graphic adventure games at insane rates. In fact, Sierra, famous for the King's Quest series, had 7 King's Quests. Then they created 2 other branch-off series called Police Quest and Space Quest that were the same as King's Quest, but King's Quest was high fantasy, Space Quest was sci-fi, and Police Quest was realistic modern day. And they were like releasing... These games often had like 9-month development times to them. They were just like churning them out. But again, when you have something where I have to do this exact thing to solve the puzzle, if I can't tap into what the designer was thinking at the time, the game stops fucking happening. And there's this really famous article that was released at the time called the suicide of graphic adventure games. Because so many people were talking about, there's all this really great stuff about graphic adventure games that I'll come to in a moment. There's all this great stuff, but people are going for more casual games. Does this sound familiar? Why is no one making any more hardcore games? It's always casual mobile games. Well, back in the graphic adventure day, why are people going for these casual first-person shooter games that are all about action as opposed to something very intellectual about solving puzzles with moon logic. Same thing. And what this person wrote about in this article called The Suicide of Adventure Games was that these graphic adventure games were getting so poorly designed and doing such far-fetched ideas that, of course, no one would want to play them. And the example that they used was a puzzle where you need to break into a party, but the person at the gate won't let you in unless you have an ID that proves that you can get in. So you steal a driver's license, and what you have to do is you have to put adhesive on the top of a hole, scare a cat to cause it to run through the hole. The adhesive will tear off some of the cat's hair. You put the hair on as a mustache, and then you use a Sharpie to draw a mustache on the face of the stolen ID you have. You show it to the person. They see the mustache here. They see the mustache there. They let you in. What? And so graphic adventure games slowly tapered away into essentially non-existence. There are still some really classic adventure games that hold up, such as Myst, which you can get on Steam. Just look up a real Myst, M-Y-S-T, where many of the puzzles are a self-contained mechanism. You walk up to this mechanism, you fiddle with it until you understand how it works, and you rearrange some stuff to create a path across a bridge and then move across the bridge. Really like these kinds of games. And as reasonable as I think it is that there's been this smoothing in games over time. You play Skyrim and you say, hey, how do I get here? And an arrow flies out of your fucking head and says, go this way. You know, if you stop moving in some linear first-person or third-person games, tooltip comes up that's like, remember to go here and to take out this item because this person asked you to do it because it's trying to shove you along, trying to shove you along, trying to shove you along. But here's the thing that I think is magical about those old graphic adventure games that this game here Myst. What the fuck? This game here, Inscryption, is doing a really good job of capturing. Is this idea of mystery and wonder. Because back in the olden days, before Al Gore had invented the internet, is that joke still funny? Does anyone still appreciate that joke? It was funny 10 years ago. It's fine. I don't have new jokes. I just go to the same tired database again and again. Back before the internet was a thing, when you got stuck in one of these graphic adventure games, you just didn't progress. There was no... You didn't know what happened next. This was true in all games. Like in Mega Man 2, if you beat the second stage of Wily's Castle but lost on the third, you never knew what happened after then, unless you just got better. But in those graphic adventure games, you would often be locked in these really surreal, beautiful, interesting, rich spaces. And you'd be trying things, then you'd have an idea, and then suddenly you'd hit something and a secret passage would open, and then what would be on the other side? 3 or 4 screens that you didn't even know were there. Oh, and those were also very interesting and detailed. Each was often like hand-painted or hand-crafted to have a very particular viewpoint. And that feeling of not really knowing what was going on the other side in any structural sense. What do I mean by a structural sense? In Super Meat Boy, you beat level 1, you go to level 2. You beat level 2, you go to level 3. It shows you how many levels there are to beat. And if you're on level 50 and you can't beat it because you're not good enough, you still have a clear intuition that when you complete this, there's going to be another level, there's going to be more platforming, yada, 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 yada. But in these old graphic adventure games, you had no idea what was going to be on the other side of that door, if there was something on the other side of that door, if you were close to the end of the game. I remember in King's Quest VI, that feeling of, oh my gosh, there's not just one island, there's 4 islands. This wonder, this sort of like rule breaking that goes on. And here's as best as I can describe a mechanics explanation of where this feeling comes from. In a lot of games, I'm just going to categorize things in the game as your goals, your obstacles, and your tools, right? In Mario, your goal is to go right. Like the 2D Mario games. You start here, you just go to this side until you hit the end of the level. What are your obstacles? You need to jump over pits. You need to not get killed with various monsters. And what are your tools? Well, for Mario, it's jumping. He solves all his problems in life by hitting his head on things via jumping or landing with his feet on things via jumping. Occasionally he can shoot fire, but he's a jumper, okay? It is satisfying to do those platforming puzzles and to time things out. That is really satisfying. But when do those moments of wonder suddenly get you all excited? A lot of times it's when your obstacles or your goals, the constraints that are placed on you, change in a big way. Like when you stand on the tube and hit down, I suddenly am just going down into the earth. Oh my gosh, wow. The constraints on the game, when you see in Super Mario 3, you can go this way or you can go that way. And then you do something that suddenly breaks the path over to this way. It's when those constraints break, those constraints change, that it creates this feeling of wonder and mystery where it feels like there's going to be surprises hidden around the corner. Now, this is different from getting a tools change, which might be something like you're playing and you have these, put on the hat, lets you shoot fireballs. Oh, then you get a different hat that lets you shoot frost balls that freeze enemies instead of killing them. Okay. Sure. Cool. That's fun. I'm not saying it isn't fun. I'm just saying that this doesn't create this feeling of wonder and mystery and, oh my gosh, it's crazy, this is so cool. It's when you start breaking the obstacles, start breaking the constraints of the world. And I think most broadly of all, when the goal starts getting messed with. You got to be really careful about confusing the player as to what their goal is. If in Mario you went from left to right and left to right and left to right, having a really clear goal can ground everything the player's doing and let fun happen at all. In Dota, push the towers, get last hits, shove in the lanes to destroy the Ancient. You do that every single game. I've just passed 3,000 hours played of Dota, and the fact that that goal is so clear and unchanging means as I'm playing, I'm getting better and better, and I'm still guided every time. You don't want to be in a situation where your player has no clue. What am I supposed to want? What is it that I want, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So in this game, I'm finally going to keep playing the game.